In the 2024 American election, black people voted massively for Donald Trump. Compared to the votes he received before, which were 10%, this time, Donald Trump succeeded in getting 20% of African American votes. This is phenomenal, given that black voters have historically remained loyal to the Democratic Party. So, does it mean Donald Trump promised something in private with black leaders and businessmen? And can it mean slavery reparations? Seeing from the perspective that African Americans did not trust Kamala Harris this time suggests that something has happened behind closed doors. So, in this video, let's know what Donald Trump thinks about slavery reparations, what he promised, and what he will do. Let's get started.
The Black History Archives.
The slavery reparation debate has been going on for decades, but it reached an important turn when California took the lead on this issue, exploring how best to compensate for the lasting harm caused by centuries of racial discrimination. The state's Reparations Task Force was given the mandate to study these impacts and propose actionable solutions. By 2023, the task force put forward a bold recommendation to provide direct cash payments of up to $350,000 per eligible African American. After this proposal, the discussion began that all states should initiate such a study and take practical steps to implement the proposal. Or a better idea was to simply expand this proposal to all states. And this election was an understood choice between what two candidates promised about the reparations and what they could really do. In this respect, Kamala Harris emphasized the need for a comprehensive study on financial reparations before taking any concrete steps. Rather than committing outright to direct payments, she shifted the conversation toward her broader economic agenda, which focuses on empowering black communities through wealth-building initiatives. In other words, Kamala is in favor of making arrangements, probably by improving the system, that can allow black people to have equal opportunities. Instead of making direct payments to black people, she wants to do this. Harris made it clear that the question of reparations is complicated and needs deeper exploration. She noted, "On the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that." This measured stance reflects her awareness of the political sensitivity surrounding the issue. By calling for further study, Harris seems to acknowledge the importance of the topic without fully committing to a specific plan. This cautious approach helped her avoid alienating potential swing voters, especially in politically contentious areas. Harris described her economic agenda as one that taps into the ambitions of Black Americans, especially when it comes to building financial independence. She explained, "My agenda is about tapping into the ambitions and the aspirations, knowing that folks want to have an opportunity, if they want, to build wealth, including intergenerational wealth." For Harris, this focus on entrepreneurship, homeownership, and capital access is a more sustainable way to bridge the racial wealth gap compared to direct cash reparations. But now, as Donald Trump has won the election, the debate should be more focused on what he plans to do. Even though Trump's victory came as a surprise for the majority of Black Americans, he is the president now, and what he believes about slavery reparations will impact the lives of nearly 50 million Black Americans in the United States. During Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, the topic of slavery reparations wasn't front and center in the national conversation. At that time, Trump rarely addressed the issue because it simply wasn't on most voters' radars. However, when prompted, Trump was quick to dismiss reparations, expressing skepticism. He questioned whether reparations were a practical or fair way to address historical injustices, hinting that he saw the idea as more divisive than constructive. Here's a reminder to please support us so we can make more videos for you by subscribing to our channel and giving the video a like. We want to build a strong community, and we need your support. Let's continue now. By the time Trump was halfway through his first term, the conversation around reparations had gained significant traction among Democratic contenders like Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders. who floated various ideas to compensate descendants of enslaved Africans. In June 2019, Trump was asked about his stance during an interview with The Hill, and his response was blunt. He said, "I don't see it happening." He argued that pursuing reparations would do more to deepen racial divides rather than heal them, suggesting it could fuel resentment among Americans rather than promote unity. Trump was clear in his position. He saw the Democrats' push for reparations as a political strategy to court black voters rather than a genuine effort to right historical wrongs. To him, it was an issue that, if pursued, would only serve to put different racial groups against each other. Later, in 2020, following the murder of George Floyd and the wave of Black Lives Matter protests, the demand for reparations resurfaced with renewed intensity. Yet Trump remained firm in his opposition. His administration doubled down on a law and order stance, focusing on supporting law enforcement rather than engaging with the calls for racial justice, which included demands for reparations. Trump's reasoning was consistent. He believed reparations unfairly penalized people who had no direct link to slavery. For him, the idea of reparations represented an unjust redistribution of wealth. Instead, he emphasized economic policies like tax cuts and job creation, arguing that these would do more to uplift the black community than any form of compensatory payments. Even after leaving office, Trump continued to push back against the idea of reparations. During his rallies and public appearances, he painted himself as a staunch opponent of woke culture, often using reparations as an example of what he viewed as the misguided policies of the left. To him, the concept of reparations had become another weapon in the culture wars. However, Trump's rhetoric began to shift subtly. He started to focus more on appealing to disillusioned Asian American and white voters. This was particularly evident in his criticisms of affirmative action, which he argued discriminated against Asian Americans in favor of other minority groups. By reframing the conversation, Trump attempted to widen his base by appealing to groups who felt overlooked or unfairly treated by progressive policies. As the 2024 presidential election approached, Trump made a surprising move by introducing what he framed as a new reparations plan. But this wasn't about compensating the descendants of slaves. Instead, during a campaign rally in November 2024, Trump unveiled a plan that targeted what he termed racial discrimination in the education sector. This new proposal included launching federal civil rights actions against schools and universities accused of racial bias in their admissions policies. It also included imposing hefty fines on institutions found guilty of such practices and using the fines collected to compensate students who were allegedly discriminated against, with a specific focus on Asian American applicants. Trump presented this plan as a fight against modern-day discrimination, positioning himself as a champion of merit-based admissions. However, civil rights groups and critics were quick to label this as a cynical ploy to redefine reparations in a way that conveniently excluded African Americans. They argued that Trump's plan sidestepped the historical context of slavery and instead catered to groups with more contemporary grievances, particularly Asian Americans. Rather than focusing on compensating Black Americans for centuries of systemic oppression, Trump appears to be pivoting towards addressing what he perceives as reverse discrimination against white Americans. This shift has sparked confusion and disappointment among those who hoped for meaningful change. Trump declared, "I will advance a measure to have them fined up to the entire amount of their endowment. A portion of the seized funds will then be used as restitution for victims of these illegal and unjust policies." This statement, which many interpreted as reparations for white Americans, caused outrage among Black voters who had hoped Trump might consider compensating the descendants of enslaved Africans. Trump's proposal appears aligned with his long-standing criticisms of DEI programs and critical race theory. For years, he has argued that such initiatives sow division and perpetuate discrimination against white people. His Project 2025 plan, which outlines a potential second-term agenda, explicitly targets dismantling DEI programs, arguing they unfairly disadvantage white Americans. Many black commentators quickly noted the implications of Trump's statements. Keith Boykin, a well-known political analyst, said that Trump announced reparations for white people. He said he would ask the Justice Department to penalize colleges that consider diversity, equity, and inclusion, and fine them so he can pay restitution to white people who he considers the real victims of racial discrimination. This shift in focus has left black voters who once believed Trump might support genuine reparations for descendants of slaves, feeling disillusioned. Instead of addressing historical injustices, Trump's focus seems to be on what he sees as discrimination against whites, leading to heated debates about whether his promises to black Americans were ever sincere. As Trump positions himself for a second term, it remains uncertain whether he will shift his focus to address the historical injustices faced by black Americans or continue to prioritize the grievances he perceives among his base. Given his track record, it appears unlikely that Trump will prioritize reparations for black communities in the way many have hoped. What do you think? Will Donald Trump do anything to pay slavery reparations to black Americans? Or do you feel it was just rhetoric and African Americans voted more for him this time simply because they were disillusioned with the Democratic Party? In the comments section right below, share your thoughts on what Donald Trump will do for black people. Will he make things better or worse? Would you like us to make more videos? If yes, please support us by subscribing to the Black History Archives and clicking the bell icon. You can check out more videos on our channel too.